in this video, I'm going to look at Princess Diana, or Lady Diana as she became known as. The reason I want to look at Diana's marriage to Prince Charles is not because I want to say that Prince Charles was an abuser. He could apparently be mean and cold and quite cruel. And we know that he had an affair, and some of this at least was behind Diana's back. From what she said, you know, when she spoke on the recordings. These may have been abuses. I don't think there's any doubt that his behaviour played a big role in Diana's misery. But I think that what was bigger was the whole context, you know, the whole situation, the royal family as the backdrop to this horrible, tragic drama. And so I think it will be useful to look at this as an example and to look at these different parallels. You will hear the sea quite a bit in this recording because I'm living right next to it at the moment, and it seems to have doubled in volume recently. The waves are massive compared to how they usually are. But now you know it's not traffic, it might be a nice backdrop. Diana's dad wanted a boy, so when Diana was born, she was a disappointment to him. And there was also conflict in the marriage as a result of Diana being born, because her father got her mother to go to Harley Street in London to figure out what was wrong with her and why she'd had another girl, because Diana had a couple of sisters. Now, there was a boy born before Diana, but he died shortly after he was born. So Diana wasn't accepted for who she was right from the start. And when she was 6 years old, they split up. And her mother went off with another guy, and she did try to get custody of Diana, but it didn't work. Her father won. Although her mother wanted custody of her and was apparently forced to give up custody, this didn't affect Diana. You know, as far as Diana was concerned, she was rejected. And she would apparently sit on the steps, on the front steps outside the house, waiting for her mother to come home, because her mum had said to her, "I will come back for you," and it just never happened. She said once in an interview that she was haunted by the sound of her mother's footsteps walking away on the gravel. Diana's brother Charles says that he was 2 at the time and that he would cry in the night, and Diana couldn't come and help him because she was too scared of the dark. But later she did, you know, she ended up mothering him apparently and trying to look after him, but she would have been really young to be doing this. And then eventually their father remarried, but this was to a bully, according to Diana, and she was very unhappy. She felt very unsupported in her childhood. Diana was brought up by different nannies and went to boarding school at 9 years old, and she describes it as a very unstable, unhappy childhood. And her brother Charles said he needed 20 years of therapy to try to come to terms with his childhood. So clearly something was lacking. Diana did end up seeing her mother at weekends, and when she was an adult, her mother bought her a flat, which is pretty generous, but I imagine she must have been really rich. So, and this was when Diana was only 18 years old. So this was the flat she was living in with her friends when she met Charles. And, you know, she was the landlady for her friends. So she did see her mum a bit, but there was this strange relationship. That's the impression I get. It seems that her mother was really competitive, and she apparently once said to Diana, "Diana, I'm the one who should have been the star." And when Diana was dating different men after she and Charles weren't working out, her mother heard about her dating Muslim men and called her a whore because of it. Diana described what her mother had said as a hate-filled personal attack on these men and their religious beliefs, and she said she was never going to speak to her mother again. So what this already has in common with the story of someone who goes into an abusive relationship is that there was something lacking in childhood. So there was an emptiness. There wasn't enough emotional support. That can leave somebody with a loneliness that they never quite get over. It's an emptiness that makes them want to fill it up with love, you know, and it also means that they're going to be a bit naive about who they get that love from.
So were you being moved?
Seriously
At a
moved.
rate?
But he wasn't consistent with his courting abilities. He'd ring me out every day for a week and then he would speak to me for 3 weeks. Very odd. And I accepted that. I thought, fine, well, he knows where I am, he wants me.
What she's just said about how Prince Charles could be inconsistent, that 1 minute he'd be calling her every day and then there'd be 3 weeks of silence where he ghosted her. Well, that shows that she had weak boundaries, because she was okay with it. You know, she said she would just wait around and he could get in touch when he wanted to. It reminds me of how she would wait around for her mother, who never came home. And I guess that because this was familiar to her, it didn't really occur to her that these were red flags, even during the marriage. Diana describes how Charles was before they got married. She says, he was obsessed with me, but it was hot and cold, hot and cold. You never knew what mood it was going to be, up and down, up and down. She just waited and waited for things to get better. I think Charles's interest in Diana was a good example of how it feels when somebody makes you feel like a princess, you know, because quite literally that's what happened. She went from, although she'd come from an aristocratic family, she was still working, you know, she was cleaning for her sister and she was looking after kids at a local nursery school. So she'd gone from that more lowly existence to suddenly being a princess.
Do you find it a very daunting experience that yesterday you were a nanny looking after children, now you're about to marry the Prince of Wales, and one day you would, in all likelihood, be Queen? It's a tremendous change for someone, if I may say, of 19 to make all of a sudden, the transition.
It is, but I've had a small run-up to it all in the last 6 months. And next to Prince Charles, I know I can't go wrong. He's there with me.
He was going to rescue her from the loneliness deep down inside her, and he was going to fill her up with love. So she might have felt that she was finally being noticed and needed and found to be really special. And that's exactly how someone wants to feel when they haven't had that in childhood. And this is the trap that people fall into when they go into abusive relationships. You know, people who have that kind of background, who never were recognised as special when they were children, and now suddenly someone does see this in them, and you know, and in the case of a narcissist, they might treat them just like a princess, like suddenly you're getting all of this attention when this person's love bombing you. So in the case of Diana, I think there's quite a good parallel here, because Charles was giving her attention, but also it was the whole idea that she was going to become a princess now, that maybe one day she was going to be queen. So she'd gone from being a really shy child who was emotionally neglected to being this young woman who was about to be a princess, who was about to appear before all of these hundreds of thousands and later, of course, millions and millions of people in the world. She ended up being the most famous woman in the world. But it all ended up being a trap, because Prince Charles was still in love with somebody else, with Camilla, and so he couldn't love Diana as she needed to be loved.
Can you find the words to sum up how you feel today, both of you?
Difficult to find that sort of word, isn't it, really? Just delighted and happy. And I'm amazed that she's been brave enough to take me on.
And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
Well, it
You can
obviously
put your own
means,
interpretation.
obviously means two very happy people.
Yes.
Once
As you
again,
can see.
congratulations.
Well, from us, congratulations.
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much. Very kind.
And Charles turned around and said what ever in love means. And that threw me completely. I thought, what a strange question.
What a strange
Answer.
reply.
God, perhaps it traumatised me.
And after they'd got engaged, just before he went away, Camilla rang him. And she didn't know what to do, so she let him talk to her in peace. You know, she left the room, but she felt really uncomfortable. And then, of course, after that, she found the bracelet that he had bought for Camilla. So here were more red flags. Charles wasn't showing respect towards Diana. He'd betrayed her trust, but she went ahead with the marriage anyway. She didn't feel that she could protect herself, and instead she gave that responsibility to Charles. And that's what people do when they have weak boundaries. She was relying on Prince Charles to protect her from his own behaviour. She was relying on him not to do it again. And of course, Diana was only 18, so she would have been particularly vulnerable. And not only that, but this was a royal wedding, and the public knew it was about to happen. So imagine the pressure she was under to go through with the wedding. She apparently spoke to her sisters after this had happened, and she was so upset, and she said she didn't want to have the wedding, but they told her, well, your names are on the tea towels now, so you can't chicken out. And so she went ahead with it. So I think it was a mixture of all of that pressure and the fact that she was so passive at that time. So it was a one-sided relationship. And that can also be a parallel to a relationship with a narcissist, because it's always going to be one-sided, because they're never going to have the capacity to love the other person. You know, and so they might come across as if they are in love at first, and that means that the other person ends up letting their guard down and being vulnerable and loving them, and then it all turns out to be a trap in the same way as this was. Camilla initially encouraged Charles to marry Diana, and according to Tina Brown, she wrote the Diana Chronicles and an article in Vanity Fair magazine, Camilla saw Diana as gormless. So she thought that Diana was going to be really malleable, and so just easy for Charles to control. And she also described her as the blushing little Spencer girl, which I think just sums up the way she viewed Diana. And of course later this backfired, because Diana spoke her mind, you know, and these recordings were released when she talked about what had been going on with Camilla and so on. Prince Charles definitely does seem to be the one with the upper hand, you know, the one who's more in control of the relationship when we look at the footage from the early days.
Are you planning for, you must be planning for the future, where you're going to live and this sort of thing? You talk
Oh
about
yes,
that?
yes. I mean, I've got this house in Gloucestershire, which I acquired last year.
With marriage in mind?
No, not really. I mean, I did want somewhere very much as a base, and I wanted somewhere which was nearer to the Duchy of Cornwall areas, that I could reach then and visit people and look at the farms and things. And so that was very convenient. But obviously, it's been a great help. There's a lot to be done. It's going to be marvellous to have somebody to help sort it out.
I'm going to continue looking at Diana in the next video, so if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you then.